We have been at Childcare CRM, we have just loved being partners with our family at GCCA for years now. You guys have been so good to us. The conferences are always some of my most favorite. So when we were asked to do this presentation, it was a no-brainer. You might have seen me in the past do the session at one of the conferences where I go through the sales processes, and I think that's really valuable. But this particular webinar, we're going to focus on the behaviors. So when you do formal sales training, which I was kind of lucky enough to do, what you learn is there's a sales process and then there are sales behaviors. And you can have great processes and terrible behaviors and not do very well at all, and vice versa. You can have great behaviors and no processes and wind up, you know, on your face there. So what we're going to talk about today are the behaviors. And if you ever want to talk about the processes or the sales cycle and how that looks, I'm happy to send you over that presentation as well, or I'm sure you can catch it at one of the GCCA conferences because we like to mix it up a little bit. If we have not already met, I think that's kind of rare. Most of you know who I am. But let me introduce myself before we get any further. So again, my name is Emily, and I am in the Solutions Department at Childcare CRM. But before I was here, I was actually a licensed director in the state of Texas, so I've been on the front lines. I've done what you do. I get it. I gave great tours. I gave not so great tours. I did great follow-up. I did not so great follow-up. I understand that your day-to-day is not solely focused on following up with prospects and closing every deal you have. You've got teachers out. You've got the macaroni and cheese crisis of 2017 happening. I totally understand. So I really like to blend these presentations with what I know about quote-unquote sales and real-world life that you guys can work around. So that's who I am. Let me see. I'm going to go to the next screen. I'm hoping it's moving for you. Okay. I'm still here. I'm just worried you guys are not seeing the same screen as me because my screen's not moving. So hang on one second. There we go. Okay. Technical difficulties. All right. So let's talk about, first of all, what is a habit and what I mean when I say the habits, the 8 habits of successful directors and tour guides and enrollment specialists. So what I mean when I say habit is that this is something that you do without thinking about. It might be a great habit. It might be a bad habit. For instance, like during this webinar, you're going to hear me say the word a lot. It's a terrible habit. I've been trying to break it since I was like 16, and it's just not going anywhere. So that's a bad habit. That's an example of a bad habit. But we are also going to focus on the things that you will just wake up and do without thinking about. And that's what I want some of these to become. That you just get up every tour, every phone call, you're putting one of these in place without really thinking about it. You don't even notice you're doing it. So how long does it take to form a habit? 21 days, right? We have all heard 21 days. It takes 21 days to form a habit. Is that the truth? It's not, actually. So that myth of the 21-day cycle to form a habit, it actually came from this guy named Maxwell Maltz, who's was a cosmetic surgeon. So I have no idea how he became the expert on how long it takes to form a habit, but it is not 21 days, sadly. It's much, much longer than that. So the time it takes to form a habit is actually 66 days. So I'm sorry to break your heart, but the truth is that if you pick up one of these habits today and you start it, it's going to take on average 66 days, which is 3 weeks more than what we all thought of that 21 days. So that number is actually coming from a bunch of studies out of London and Dubai and here stateside, where they're just taking a larger population of people and testing these things. So I want you to keep in mind that if you find something today that you love and you decide as a team you're going to pick it up and run with it, it realistically is going to be like June 16th before you should be able to say this is a habit. So we're going to talk about 8 today. And by no stretch of the imagination do I think that you're going to pick all 8 up today and be really rocking them by June 16th. If you are, come see me because I need to learn a few things. But I want you to find one that you really, that resonates with you, that you think you guys can attain, and decide as a team, like, this is the habit we're going to form. We're going to be rock stars by June 16th, and then we're going to try another one. So keep that in mind. It is 66 days to form these habits. All right, let's jump into them. So first habit, Get in the habit of believing in what you're providing. And I know that sounds very obvious, right? Do you believe? Do you believe that your center, your organization is the best in your community, that you really are offering the best out there? Because the truth is it's much easier to be passionate and to sell, not that we love that word, but to sell something that you actually believe in. When I do these conferences and we're out at exhibit halls and I'm meeting all the other vendors, the best of us out there, we actually use our products. So the sunscreen people, they've got that sunscreen in their car. The sanitizing people, they actually use that at home. The emails that you get from me inviting you to things, those come from Child Care CRM because I used it as a director. And yes, there are other CRM systems out there, but I happen to believe that mine is the most effective, the easiest to use, and the most efficient, really. And it makes my job of doing these demos with you guys and training you, it makes it so much easier because I really do believe that I have the best product. And so you should really be thinking that too. So if you've got kids at your school that are your own, great. But even if you don't, would you recommend it to your family friends? Would you recommend it to your nieces and nephews? Do you believe that this is really the best place for any child to be? If you don't, I don't want you to go any further. I need you to just reevaluate, refocus, and figure out how you can find that passion, again, about your organization and your school. So let's break it down. The outside of the building. Do you believe that your school has the best curb appeal in the neighborhood? That when people drive by, they just have to stop and go inside. Do you believe that it's the best building in the neighborhood? And how about the insides of the classrooms? Do you believe that they're the best stocked, the most furnished, the most organized, the safest place for kids to be? Do you believe that the inside of the classroom is the best in the community? And the teachers. This is something that I struggled with a lot as a director. Could I have said that every teacher at every time slot in every classroom was the best fit, was doing far better than anybody else in the community at that classroom level? And the answer for that for me was no. Sometimes it was just convenient that she wanted to work 7:30 to 4:30 and I had an opening in the 2-year-old classroom. She wasn't necessarily the best 2-year-old teacher. It just was what I had at the time. But I want you to really get in the habit of saying, if this is not the right seat for you, I'm going to find the right seat for you. And if there is not a right seat for you, I'm going to ask you to leave. So really believe that those teachers are the best and in the best place that they can be. And how about the kids? Do you have the safest, most well-loved, nurtured, healthiest babies, healthiest preschoolers? Do you have the best kids in the neighborhood? Because the truth is that when people are buying, they are not actually buying because they believe the product is better. They buy it because you believe as a salesperson it's better. I'll just tell you, this last weekend, we are a Sam's family. We are at Sam's every month. But when you go there and they've got the vendors out kind of doing little samples of stuff, well, there was a salsa vendor there, and I am like salsa's #1 fan, for sure. If you ever need a date to a patio with margaritas and salsa, I'm your girl. But so when I saw this lady, I actually I was like, well, you must be pushing a product that's not that great, or you wouldn't have to give up your Saturday at 8 a.m. to be here sampling this. So I actually was like, that's probably not very good salsa. But of course, my kids roped me into going over there. I start talking to the lady. I try the salsa, and first bite, I'm not all that convinced. But then she starts going on about the farm-sourced ingredients, and she uses it in her breakfast burritos, and she used it in her quesadillas last night. And before I knew it, I was hooked on this salsa, and I left with 3 jars. But it was all because she truly believed it was the best salsa in the store at the moment. It had nothing to do with my preconceived notion of it. So keep that in mind, that you really have to believe that you've got the best package in the neighborhood. Second habit, let's talk about setting goals and having a plan. And in order to start that, I need you to begin with the end in mind. And you've probably heard that a million times, but you've just kind of passed over it. But what I mean by that is where do you need your center to be at the end of the week, right? Where do you need it to be at the end of the month or the quarter, or when you get to January 1st, 2018? Where do you guys need it to be? And you might be able to measure it and say, okay, we need enrollment up by 30 kids, or we need our wait list managed and down by 30 kids. So you have specific goals, but you need to really be thinking about where you need to go, not where you're at today when you're setting them. There was a Harvard study that came out, and of course it was about students and their setting goals and graduation and stuff like that, but I think it kind of is all relatable. So what it said is that the students that set goals and then came back and monitored them, whether it was with like an accountability partner or even by themselves, but if they set a goal for the end of the semester and checked on it periodically, they performed 30% better than the other students who didn't set any goals, period. So the fact is that even if you set these goals today and you don't hit them, you're still going to do better than your competition down the street that has 0 goals in place. Okay, so better to have one and go back and check on it than to just say, yeah, we need enrollment up. All right, so when you are setting these goals, this was kind of one of my biggest faults as a director, is I would say, yeah, we need 10 enrollments by the end of the week. But I didn't really make it measurable. I had no metrics to prove that. So this is something that I've learned now in this side of the world. When you're setting goals, you need to think, are they smart, right? Is it a specific goal? So don't just tell me I want curb appeal to improve. Well, specifically, I'm going to power wash the siding, I'm going to install shutters, and I'm going to paint the front door. That's a specific goal to improve curb appeal. And then is it measurable, right? So if one of your goals is to, I don't know, have teachers participate in the tours. Well, don't just say we want teachers to participate in all of our tours. I want you to say we want teachers to shake hands of parents 9 out of 10 times on every tour. That's a measurable goal. I can go back at the end of the quarter and say, yes, we met that goal. Is it attainable? That's one of the most important, right? We can't have these pie in the sky, lofty goals all the time. It's just not reasonable for some of us to say, we're going to open 10 centers by the end of the year. Well, that's not attainable for all of us. But what is attainable is maybe, you know, staffing the classrooms a little bit better or improving the menu. Those are attainable goals. Is it relevant? If your goal was to improve curb appeal, then having teachers shake hands is not relevant to that goal, right? So keep that in mind when you're setting these goals. You know, what are your objectives and where are you trying to go, and really stay laser focused. And then this is the one where I really got hung up on, is the time-based thing. It was very easy for me to just say we need 10 more enrollments, but I didn't say we need 10 more enrollments by April 30th. I didn't have that date in mind. I just said we need to get 10 more enrollments. And when I started setting those dates and saying we're going to get here by April 30th or by the end of the quarter and checked in on them, I could say I'm on track or I'm off track. And it would really help propel me to get back on track and get that objective done. And the truth is, you guys, is you could be the most charismatic, influential person in your center. But if you don't have an organizational system or you don't have something to keep you in line, those sales efforts, those conversion efforts, they're going to suffer. So the top salespeople that I know on my side of the world, we're extremely organized. We start every day knowing, here's what we're going to get done, here's the behavior I'm going to work on, here's the goal I'm working on today. And that's how we approach every sales effort we have, or every tour that we're giving. That's how we approach it. Here's the behavior I'm working on, and here's what I need the objective to be. All right, I'm moving to the next slide. I can tell some of you are not looking at the screen, so come back, come back. The next habit is probably one that's going to blow your mind. In the sales world, when I went to formal sales school, I learned about this concept called pre-call planning and post-call debriefing. And it's not something that I had ever heard of when I was giving tours or running a center, and I wish that I could go back and put some of this in place. So I realized that it's not feasible to say that you're going to pre-tour plan on every tour and you're going to debrief immediately after one is done. But what the concept here is, when you have a tour, whether it's a walk-in tour or whether it's a scheduled tour, I want you to be thinking of some things. So what's your objective from that particular tour that's walking in the door, right? Because your objective from somebody who, say, is moving to the area in July might be different than somebody who is looking for childcare in 3 weeks. The objectives there are different. Who is participating in this tour, right? What are the roles that you expect from them? And I don't just mean the person giving the tour. I mean, who's opening the door and what do you expect her to say? And the parents, those are participants too. So what do you expect from those people walking around with you on the tour? Do I have information from previous phone calls or previous visits that I can bring to this tour and use? Do I have any roadblocks? And when I say roadblock, like, do I know this parent is very concerned with the menu or that they've been bitten at their last center? What are the roadblocks that you're aware of that you can use? And most importantly, how are you going to get to a decision? So a yes, we're going to enroll, a no, this is not a good fit for us, or a clear next step. Because that's the objective on every single tour, is to get to a decision so that you can stop chasing people. All right, I love my last owner to death. this, I swear to you, was her. She would just come in and be like, all right, 10 more enrollments, that's it. But there was no like evaluation of where we're at or how we were going to get there. It was literally just like, give me 10 tours, give me 10 enrollments, end of story. But in this sales world, you have, if you've been in corporate America before this, you know that you have sales managers and you have sales representatives. And the sales representatives, they're out there on the front lines doing the meetings, doing the demos. But the sales manager, it's their job to come back and say, okay, how did our demos go? How did our sales calls go? Where do we need to go? What do our goals look like? So who in your organization is the sales manager? Who is managing this process and checking in with the people actually giving the tours? And when you're debriefing, and I don't think you should do this every day. I think that's not reasonable because you just have other things going on. But I don't want you to go a month. I want you to like work it into a Friday meeting or a Friday lunch, whatever you want to do. But at the end of the week, I want you to get all the tours that you have done. And I want you to go specifically one by one and say, okay, on the tour with the Joneses, we could have done this better. And when that tour ended, it either went how I wanted it to go or it didn't. What did you do awesome on the tour with the Joneses, and how could you have gotten to a better outcome? And I don't want you to just say, overall, the tours this week were like this. I want you to specifically break down every single tour so that it's fresh in your mind. Also, be putting those notes in your CRM system so that you can easily pull them up and have them ready for that meeting. But, specifically tour by tour, it's going to improve your behaviors so much more if you stop just blanketing and saying, oh, on the tours this week, the classrooms were a mess. Specifically what happened on every tour. All right, you guys are probably sick of me talking about the upfront contract, but it is honestly one of my favorite things, and it's something that I wish I could go back on every tour and do. So basically what you are looking at when you're talking about the upfront contract is you are getting rid of what's called mutual mystification. So in the buying and selling world, somebody has taught us as consumers that we don't tell salespeople everything because they're going to take advantage of that. And somebody has told salespeople, they've told us that like we don't tell the prospect our bottom line because then they'll take advantage of it or whatever. So we have this like tug of war going on, and it's happening to you on your tours too. So what the upfront contract does is it eliminates that. And there's a fair amount of stress, right? I mean, the anxiety that happens, even if you have a scheduled tour, you've all had it. When that car parks in the parking lot, you just start panicking, like, oh my gosh, what does the classroom smell like? What's the teacher doing right now? I hope she put her phone away. You have anxiety too, and the upfront contract just says, like, we're going to get rid of your anxiety and the parents' anxiety. And these are the four components of them. So I call it A-NOT, but basically it's appreciate, naturally, obviously, and typically. Those are the four components of an upfront contract, and it sounds something like this. It's not very, doesn't roll off the tongue, but if you practice it and you go over and over and you put it in kind of your own lingo, there it is, again, I said jeez. It'll be really great. So it goes something like this. So you're going to say, thank you so much for coming to visit Lucky Learners today. I appreciate you coming to take a look around. When we talked, we discussed about 30 minutes for the tour. Is that still good for you? So what you're doing by getting the time out of the way there is now you know, does the parent have the full 30 minutes to give you so you can cover the whole thing? Or if they say, actually, we have like 15 minutes, then you have to make a decision. Can you get through everything you need to get through in 15 minutes, or do you need to reschedule? So I really want you to be mindful of getting the time in there so you know how to pace your visits. Then you'll say, naturally, you're going to want to know more about our teachers and our programs and our curriculum and fill in the blank here. And obviously, I'm going to want to make sure that we're the best fit for your family, so I'm going to have some questions for you. So there's the contract piece. You're going to have questions for me. I'm going to have questions for you, and we are both participants, and we're going to need to do this together, or I'm not showing you around my school. You have to participate too. So that's the contract piece of it. And then at the end, you'll say, typically at the end of our visits, we're going to come back up front and we're going to discuss what makes sense for Sophie. Does that sound okay with you? So you guys, if you can get that last sentence in there, typically at the end of our tours, we come up and we talk about next steps. It's going to diffuse all of the resistance you get when you come back to the front and you start getting the registration stuff out and talking about the fees. That's not a very comfortable conversation, but if you say that before you even walk out the door, at the end of this, it usually makes sense that we sit down and talk about the next steps to see if maybe we're going to be the best solution for your family. Then at the end, when you do it, it's not a shock to anybody. that it's time to start talking about prices and registrations and asking for the enrollment. So if you get that line in there, I promise you it's going to make it just a whole lot easier and less pressure on you when it's time to ask for the enrollment. Get in the habit of actually listening. I know that seems like a novel concept, but it's true. I mean, you guys have been with salespeople before and they just talk the whole time. Really, the best salespeople, we just shut up and listen, because it doesn't matter what that parent is saying to me, actually. It's nothing that you haven't heard before. You guys do tours day in and day out. How many times have you heard the same thing? They don't like the teacher turnover. They hate the menu. They've been bitten 6 times. It's not like you're hearing new things. You know what you're going to have to talk against. But if you can have them talk and talk and talk and talk, they're just reminding themselves why they're here in the first place. So just stop band-aiding it, because we have a tendency as directors to like be fixers, and listen to them. And the way you're going to do that is by asking the right questions. Okay, so of course you're going to do the who, what, why, when, how soon do you need enrollment. You're already doing that. I know that. But what I want you to do is not just answer everything right away. I want you to make these open-ended. So, what's bringing Sophie to Lucky Learners today? Well, we've had a good experience for the last couple of years, but she's been through 6 bites this week. Oh my gosh, has it always been like that? No, actually, we really loved the infant program, but since then there's a new director. Oh wow, have you been anywhere else to look around? Yeah, blah blah blah. I mean, you're just opening this whole can for them and reminding them again why they don't like where they're currently at and why they've walked in your door today. So I want you to just take them down in the sales process. It's called a pain funnel, but basically, like, the big overriding thing is that Sophie was bitten. But let's get down to the nitty-gritty with more open-ended questions and find out, like, oh, Sophie's been bitten because she's been put in a classroom that's over ratio with a brand new teacher and there's a new director there. That's really the problem, is it's feeling chaotic. So take them down that funnel. Never interrupting the parent. I'm not suggesting that you guys are actually interrupting, but I think as directors we tend to, like I said, we are fixers. We band-aid it. So when we hear that Sophie's been bitten, we immediately jump to the solution. Oh my gosh, we don't have a biting problem here. Everything's going to be fine. She won't be bitten. Well, that's not what we need to do. We need to keep going down the line with them, down this rabbit trail. So don't band-aid it. As soon as they tell you what their problem is, don't fix it right away. I want you to keep it going for a little bit just to kind of get them just fired up even more. Responding appropriately, open-ended questions. If you run out of one, the one that I use all the time is literally just that O. Like, if you run out of an open-ended question and they say things like, yeah, well, it was actually pretty okay when she was in the infant program. Oh, and then pause. It's awkward. It's really, really awkward. But you've done your part of the conversation, so they have to come back with something, and you just are getting more information. So try that one every now and then. And then clarify their answers before you start replying. What that does is it just basically gets you the information you need, for one, but it also shows people that you listened and you heard what they said. So clarify things, use the open-ended questions, and don't band-aid things right away when you're talking to them. Next habit, get in the habit of being a great storyteller. What do I mean by that? So what's your story? And come back. There's a lot of you not looking. I can see you. Come back, come back, come back. We're almost done, I promise. So when you are doing these tours or talking to these parents, I want you to think about changing it up from just telling them what they're seeing in your center to telling stories, because people stick with stories. Like, you guys remember stories that people have told you, not necessarily sales pitches. Does that make sense? Like Super Bowl commercials. It's not actually that you remember that they were selling Doritos. You remember the story they told you in the commercial. That's why they're so successful. So that 7% versus 93%, what that means is that it's 7% what you're actually saying and 93% of how you're telling it. So when I do the sessions at the conferences, there are certain stories that if you sit in that room with me, you can tell, like, I still get goosebumps. They still make me really emotional. And because they really mean something to me, and you guys have been able to tell that. And that's how I want you to think of how you tell these stories. Can the parent see that this is really affecting you? The components that you need in a great story are, for one, you need a likable hero. And newsflash, it is not you. You are not the likable hero ever in these stories. The likable hero is the other parent that dealt with the same problem, or the other child that had the same issue. That's the likable hero. And the likable hero needs to encounter a roadblock and then come out the other end totally transformed. So what do I mean by that? Like, Oh, let's use the tuition thing, right? This is a little bit out of our budget. You know what? That's not uncommon. I've heard that before. And in fact, we just had somebody enroll recently who this was very, very top of the spectrum for them. They weren't sure they could pull it off, but it's taken just a couple of weeks, and now all of a sudden, I don't think they'd go anywhere else. So it was somebody just like them who had the same roadblock who has now totally changed their mind. That's what you need in a great story. And I am not suggesting that you guys lie or make these up. You have so many stories in your building of people who have come from horrible teacher turnover and been bitten 17 times and got a food that they weren't supposed to because of a food allergy and are paying way more than they expected. But they have come through your programs and they have ended up on the other side totally humongous fans of you. Those are the stories I want you to harness. And I want you to have like 3 of them in your wheelhouse at any given time. So when a parent gives you an objection, this is too expensive, or we're not sure we want to do the Montessori curriculum, or whatever, you can tell them a story about somebody who had the same feelings as them and has come out the other end. That's how you tell a great story. So get in the habit of being a phenomenal storyteller. That is what people remember. They do not remember what was on your curriculum calendar or how long your teacher has been in the building. That's not what they stick with. All right, this one seems obvious too, but get in the habit of following up and keeping your promises. The truth is that most directors do not follow up after an inquiry call or a tour. Maybe they follow up after a tour. But if somebody is just calling for more information, even my best CRM users are really bad about calling back after a phone call. And even if that parent didn't ask for a phone call and they dump you to voicemail, it still makes you look way more professional than anybody else. And it makes them feel kind of important that you took the time to call or text them or send an email after they called you or they toured especially. And if you do have a defined processes, and some of you on this call are CRM users, so you've got the business rules in there telling you what to do, but who's inspecting it? Who is opening the CRM system and looking at the notes and the descriptions of those follow-up calls and making sure it just doesn't say followed up with new lead? Who's inspecting that in there? Are you just assuming that because a task is completed, it's done the right way? Most people don't know if prospects are even opening emails. Now, you guys as CRM users are lucky enough to have that, and I want you to harness that information. Look and see if that prospect is opening your emails and what the timestamps are. Don't forget, you have a timestamp. So if you're calling and calling and calling and you're never getting through, but they're opening an email at 4:45, make it a point to call that person at 4:45 because that seems to be when they're available and in front of their phone. The other thing that we tend to do as directors, and I was probably guilty as more than anybody, was over-promising and under-delivering. And you guys have all done that. How many of you have done a tour and you have over-promised and then you know darn well that that 2-year-old teacher is not going to deliver what you just said? Don't do that. Set realistic expectations. I'm telling you, it would have been so much better for me if I had explained that in the morning we were combined and in the afternoon we were combined and they could expect to see children here and not in the, we don't usually do that because we just want to make everybody happy. But if I had set reasonable expectations of what they were going to see when they picked up at 5:55 at night, it might have gone over a lot better. But that's why I lost most of my enrollments, is because I promised the moon and stars and I didn't quite get there every time. So remember that perception is reality, that if you can just explain to people why you're doing what you're doing, they're going to believe you more. But if you sell them the moon and stars and then you don't deliver on that, their perception is that you lied to them and that you're going to lie to them over and over and over again rather than just being honest in the beginning. Do check-ins with these people. Don't just do that first day check-in, but check in on day 7 and 30 and 60 and 90 when they enroll with you. I think those should escalate. If you're an owner on my call, one of those should be you, even if it's an email. Something should come from you saying, hey, I'm Audrey, I'm the owner. I just wanted to introduce myself and see if you had any questions along the way. Here's my contact information. Call me if you need anything. Because the truth is that you have a lot of parents like me in your school. And I am pretty open and honest, but I'll tell you what, like my kid's after school director, she's never going to know if I'm unhappy. And it's not because I don't like her. It's not because she hasn't told me, come to me if you have any issues. I just am non-confrontational with that person that's front line. I don't want to tell her that I'm unhappy. But when the regional director calls or sends an email to say, hey, how are things going? I'm more apt to say, hey, Keith, everything's good except this, because I know that he'll bring it back to her. I don't have to be the one to do it. So I think escalating those check-ins, you're going to get a lot more information than you ever will if every check-in comes from the director. All right, last one. Get in the habit of asking for feedback and referrals. When are you doing it? Most of you are doing annual parent surveys. I think that's great. But why? Why not check in after their tour? Why not check in after their parent orientation? Why not check in and get feedback in the sales process? You know, I mean, how many times have you guys done it? You go get fast food and they ask you for like your feedback. I mean, just get in the habit. And a lot of people will ignore these surveys. I acknowledge that. Not everybody fills out surveys. But I think if you make it a habit in the touring and enrollment process that you're going to ask for feedback every step of the way, that when they are enrolled and you start asking for feedback again, they know that that's just your style, that you're a center who is going to ask for surveys and feedback every step of the way. They're comfortable with it. Asking for referrals. So we live in a world of social media and reviews. This is not something that people are not familiar with by any stretch of the imagination. Most people are 4 times more likely to buy a product when it's referred to them by a friend or a coworker or somebody that they trust, right? 16% of people who were referred will stay with you longer than people who just kind of found you organically. And then 83% of people that are satisfied are willing to refer you or to give you a recommendation for their peers. So I want you to think about this kind of out of the box. Break the, I don't know, the status quo a little bit here. And instead of just getting that sign at the front of your desk, you know, on your front counter or sending that email every now and then, why don't you pull a couple parents aside, you know, and say, you just had a company come to town, right? A brand new organization, employer came to town, and you have a parent that worked there. So why don't you pull them in your office and say, hey, Mike, I just want to see what your experience has been so far at Lucky Learners. Is there anything we could do to improve it? Yada, yada, yada. And when he says, no, we've loved to hear, the teachers are great, Miss Amanda's been amazing, I want you to just say, like, you know what, that makes me so happy. I know there are other parents just like you at your, you know, employer, and there's a lot more of them coming to town. We would love to meet some of them. If you know anybody who really needs a fit like this, send them my way. I'm happy to show them around. Just go that extra mile. And sometimes even I will go as far as like doing the work for the parent, right? So, hey, your employer just brought 600 people to town. I went ahead and put together, you know, an email template introducing us. I'm going to send it your way. And if you meet anybody in the break room or whatever, send it out to them. And if they need anything, tell them to come my way. That metric on the bottom, that 20-60-20, that's going to talk about the rules behind referrals and introductions. So 20% of your parent base is going to refer you whether you want them to or not. Like whether you're asking or not, those parents are talking about you. The other 20% are never going to refer. It's just not their thing. And that's totally fine. Let them off the hook. It's not a big deal. As much as they love you, they're just not referring kind of people. What you are looking for is that 60%. I call it the movable middle. It's people that would absolutely refer you and talk about you, but we don't ask. We forget to do it. So, you know, be consistent with them, and we have to have proactive conversations with that movable middle in order for them to give us the referral. So keep that in mind. You guys are big on referrals too. I guarantee if you see a review on your neighborhood Facebook page of a local Mexican restaurant who's doing 20% off, when it's time to talk about dinner tonight, that's going to come up in conversation. It's because somebody reviewed it. So don't get yourself out of that loop. You're included in it. You are a business. All right, I think I did it. I stayed under my 45 minutes, even with some technical difficulties. My information's on the screen. If you have any questions, feel free to throw them in that Q&A box. I will stay on for a little bit. I'm also very, very excited to see all of you on the 28th at the conference. Stop by the booth, come say hi to me. GCCA is one of my favorite sessions of the year, so I can't wait to see you guys all there. I'm going to put myself on mute, but if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the QA. There is one handout that you can get in that dashboard. It's called the tour debrief. So if you liked that habit about sitting down at the end of the week and debriefing about what went well, what we could improve on, I went ahead and put that debrief sheet in there for you, so print it off and make it part of your weekly meetings. It's been great talking with you all, or talking to you all. I'm looking forward to you guys talking back at some point. I'm going to go ahead and mute, but if you've got questions, throw them in there, and I will stay on to answer them. Have a great day. Oh, that's a good question. Okay, so if you're still here, one of my favorite friends, Audrey, had a question about running through what a parent says when they say tuition is too expensive or that's higher than other people in the area. And I think what we tend to do as directors or tour givers is we kind of get defensive about it and we say, you know, well, it's because of X, Y, and Z. And really the best thing that you can do is to flip the script a little bit and say something like, you know what, that's not uncommon. I've heard that before. And remember the likable hero and the roadblock and the emerging transformed. So if you say that's not uncommon, I've heard it before, even if you haven't, what you're doing basically is letting them off the hook, because that's not always an easy thing for somebody to tell you that they don't have that kind of money in their budget. And you're using a third-party story. So it's not you defending the tuition and going over and over it. It's somebody else. It's other people in your center who have had the same experience. Like, look, we're really full. And not one of them has thought that we were totally, really relatively inexpensive. Most of them, or I've heard that before, maybe not most of them, but, you know, we've heard that before. It's not uncommon. I really think that if you just give us a shot, that you'll see the value within a matter of days. Like, just you will see it, because here's why other people have seen it. I dealt with that so often, you know, with Kids Are Kids and Primrose. We were always the top of the neighborhood. And if I had just said, that's not uncommon, it is okay, it's not new to me, and here's other parents that have had the same thought, and look, there's little Sophie right now in the infant room, and it just took them like hours before they realized that this was the best bet for them. I think it's not, you know, it's easy for us to do the whole you get what you pay for thing, but that's kind of a turn off to parents too. So if you just own it, especially if you're one of those organizations who never does discounts, never does promotions, that's another sales tactic too, to never, ever, ever discount yourself, ever. And you really have to be comfortable with saying, we know it, our parents know it, and we've heard it before, but the value is really here, and we think if you just give us a shot, you're going to figure that out, you know, by the end of your first day. I hope that helps. The other thing, Audrey, now that I'm thinking about it, that you can do is, you know, if you're, especially if you're having that conversation at the end of the tour, you can, remember they're participants in this, so you can kind of flip it back on them and say, oh, well, what were you kind of expecting? And if it's $50 off a week, then you know, like, oh, we might not be a solution for you. But if it's like within $10, what you could say is, okay, so Audrey, what I understand is that if it were $10 less a week, that this would totally be the choice you'd make. You would not go anywhere else if it was $10 less. You know, because you're almost going to challenge their ego a little bit. Like, you're telling me that because it's $10 more a week, you're not even going to consider it, even though we covered X, Y, and Z, and you decided that it was a good fit for you. So that's a little bit more brazen. I don't know that it's going to work with every parent. It definitely is going to work with dads. I'll tell you that, because they like to be challenged a little bit. But that's another thing you could do. All right, everyone, I think we've answered the questions that are going to come in. If you have any more, shoot me an email, give me a call. I'm available all day. Would love to talk to you. If not, I'll see you on the 28th at GCCA. Do not be a stranger. Come say hi to me. Thanks again for joining us. We'll talk to you soon.